On November 7, 2025, a shocking murder occurred on the Carnival Horizon cruise ship during its Caribbean voyage from November 2 to 9. The victim was Anna Kepner, an 18-year-old girl from Florida. Anna was an honor student about to graduate from high school and had big plans for the future, including joining the U.S. Navy, becoming a K-9 police officer, or cheering for the Georgia Bulldogs. Anna was found dead on the morning of November 7 by the housekeeping staff. Her body was discovered under the bed, wrapped in a blanket and covered by a life jacket. These signs clearly indicated that she had been hidden while the ship was still on the open sea. The cause of death was determined to be mechanical asphyxiation, likely caused by a bar hold. Strangulation using the arm. The death was officially classified as homicide. However, as of now, no arrests have been made, and the full autopsy and toxicology reports have yet to be released. The FBI is handling the investigation due to the international waters context, where no specific national jurisdiction applies. This case has drawn significant public attention, not only because of its severity, but also of the complex family dynamics involved. Anna Kepner came from a blended family, with her stepmother Chantal Hudson having a 16-year-old son, who is considered the main suspect in the case. The boy, her stepbrother, was reportedly involved in numerous conflicts with Anna during the trip, leading to suspicion that he may have played a role in her death. Moreover, the behavior of some family members, especially Anna's paternal grandparents, has been heavily criticized. Their comments and attitudes in interviews on popular TV shows like Good Morning America and ABC have sparked controversy. Some argue that the family failed to adequately manage the relationships between its members, particularly those involving the suspect, and were negligent in their oversight and protection of Anna. This case also brings to light significant social issues such as child safety in blended families and parental responsibility in supervising teenagers. In this context, Anna's death serves not only as a personal tragedy, but also as a warning about the dangers posed by a lack of supervision and protection entered in complex family environments. As of now, the FBI is handling the case due to its complexity, arising in international waters. The investigation is ongoing, but no conclusions have been made about the cause of death or the identity of the perpetrator. Investigators are focusing on gathering evidence from interviews with key individuals, including Anna's ex-boyfriend, Josh, and his father, who have provided important information about Anna's relationships and mental state during the trip. Reports from reputable sources such as ABC, People and Fox News have provided detailed updates, but little specific progress has been made regarding the identification of the perpetrator. The Crime Weekly podcast, featuring experts like Stephanie Harlow and Derek Levasseur, has also analyzed potential scenarios related to the case. While these sources can't offer definitive conclusions, they've shed light on important aspects of the case that could be crucial in solving the crime. The Anna Kepner case is not just a family tragedy, but also a stark reminder about the importance of child protection, supervision, and parental responsibility in blended families. In particular, the involvement of a minor as the main suspect in a murder raises important questions about how society can prevent such tragedies in the future. Along with this, the ongoing debates about how to improve child protection systems and address psychological issues in complex family structures remain relevant and urgent. Cause of death. Christopher Kepner's marital history is marked by a series of complicated relationships that have had a profound impact on his daughter, Anna. His first marriage was to Heather Wright, Anna's biological mother. The couple divorced when Anna was very young, and Heather moved away, having limited contact with Anna afterward. This separation left a deep emotional scar on Anna, who later expressed her feelings of abandonment in a TikTok video, sharing the pain of her mother's absence. Kepner's second marriage was to Tabitha, a woman with a controversial history. It was reported that Tabitha was a 15-year-old babysitter when she first met Christopher, and her mother had even filed a lawsuit against Christopher, accusing him of sexual misconduct with a minor. Despite the troubling circumstances of their early relationship, the couple had 2 children together, who became Anna's half-siblings, a 14-year-old boy and a girl. However, this marriage ended in divorce, with Tabitha accusing Christopher of domestic violence, further complicating Anna's family dynamics and contributing to the instability in her life. Just a year after his divorce from Tabitha, Christopher married Chantal Hudson. Chantal came with 3 children from a previous relationship: an 18-year-old son, a 16-year-old son, and a 9-year-old daughter. This marriage added another layer of complexity to Anna's family life, as Chantal quickly moved in with Christopher and Anna. This rapid shift in family dynamics, with the addition of new siblings and a new mother figure, created additional emotional turbulence for Anna, who had already struggled with her own complicated family relationships. The blending of families did not seem to provide Anna with the stability she needed, and the tension between her and her new stepbrother, the 16-year-old son of Chantal, escalated during their time on the cruise. This environment, filled with unresolved conflicts and shifting family dynamics, played a significant role in the events leading up to Anna's tragic death. Christopher's pattern of quick marriages and complex relationships likely contributed to the instability that Anna experienced throughout her teenage years. Each of these marriages brought with it new challenges, including accusations of abuse, neglect, and abandonment, all of which left Anna grappling with her emotions and sense of security. The complicated family environment likely played a role in the emotional turmoil that Anna faced, ultimately culminating in the tragic events of her death on the Carnival Horizon cruise. Anna's life was significantly affected by the turbulent family dynamics surrounding her. After her father, Christopher Kepner, remarried Chantal Hudson, Anna's living situation took a dramatic turn. As Chantal moved in with her 3 children, an 18-year-old son, a 16-year-old son, and a 9-year-old daughter, Anna was pushed aside. She was no longer able to sleep in her own room and was instead relegated to the living or hallway to make space for Chantal's children. This marked a dramatic shift in Anna's sense of belonging and security, as she was forced to sacrifice her personal space and comfort for her new family members. The strain of being marginalized in her own home led to deep emotional distress for Anna, and her relationship with her new step-siblings became increasingly tense. Of particular concern was her dynamic with the 16-year-old son of Chantal, who would eventually become the primary suspect in Anna's death. This relationship was fraught with tension and conflict, which only escalated during their time together on the Carnival Horizon cruise. Anna's ex-boyfriend, Josh, revealed disturbing details about the behavior of the 16-year-old stepbrother. According to Josh, this young man had crossed boundaries with Anna, including an incident where he allegedly climbed into her bed during a FaceTime call. Josh recalled that the 16-year-old threatened Anna, telling her that if she reported the incident, she would be harmed. Feeling trapped and afraid, Anna confided in Josh, who urged her to tell her father, Christopher. However, when Josh reported the situation to Christopher's family, he claims that his concerns were dismissed and not taken seriously. This lack of action left Anna in a vulnerable position, isolated from the support she needed. The failure of the family to address these warning signs created a dangerous environment for Anna, one in which she felt alone and powerless. Her emotional and physical safety was neglected, and the mounting tension between her and her stepbrother contributed to the instability that ultimately led to the tragic events on the cruise. Anna's heartbreaking situation reveals how a lack of communication and proper intervention in family dynamics can lead to devastating consequences. The emotional neglect and failure to acknowledge warning signs of abuse placed Anna in an incredibly difficult position, further deepening her sense of isolation. Tragically, her family's inability to protect her would result in the loss of her life, and the failure to act on her cries for help highlighted the critical importance of adult responsibility in safeguarding the well-being of young people, especially in complex family structures. The trip aboard the Carnival Horizon was intended to be a family bonding experience, a chance for the blended family of Christopher Kepner to create lasting memories together. Sponsored by Anna's paternal grandparents, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, the vacation was meant to help strengthen family ties and establish a new tradition. However, the reality of the trip quickly became fraught with tension due to the complex family dynamics that defined this group. The family unit on the trip included Christopher, his new wife Chantal, their 2 young children, Anna and her 2 half-siblings from her father's side, and Anna's paternal grandparents. However, the arrangement of the rooms on the cruise ship sparked significant controversy and discomfort, particularly for Anna. Despite being the eldest, Anna was forced to share a room with her 14-year-old half-brothers, whom she shared a father with, and her 16-year-old stepbrother, whom she had only recently met, as he was a new addition to the family. This rooming situation was particularly uncomfortable for Anna, as the 16-year-old stepbrother had a strained relationship with her, and the two had been involved in escalating conflicts. Their tensions were made even worse by the underlying sense of unease surrounding the proximity of the living arrangements. Sharing a room with two younger males, one of whom she had only known for a brief period of time, and who had become a source of emotional distress, placed Anna in a difficult and awkward position. In such a confined space, personal boundaries were harder to maintain, and the growing animosity between Anna and her stepbrother only heightened the uncomfortable nature of the situation. This room arrangement, which had been designed to maximize space and comfort for the entire family, inadvertently set the stage for the issues that would soon escalate. It is also important to consider that Anna's paternal grandparents, who were footing the bill for the trip, may have contributed to the decision-making process regarding the room assignments. While they may have intended to create a positive family atmosphere, their involvement in such decisions, along with the failure to recognize the emotional and social dynamics between Anna and her new family members, contributed to the underlying tension. The vacation, which was supposed to be a joyful occasion for family bonding, ended up highlighting the unresolved issues within the family. Anna's strained relationship with her new stepbrother and the discomfort caused by the forced proximity in the shared room were critical elements that, combined with other tensions, created an emotionally charged environment. These circumstances eventually played a role in the tragic events that unfolded on the cruise, further underscoring the importance of addressing family dynamics and understanding the emotional needs of each member. The process of committing the crime. On the night of November 6, 2025, the Kepner family's dinner was a relatively uneventful occasion, until Anna began to experience discomfort due to her braces. She complained of jaw pain and decided to leave the family dinner early, asking to retire to her room for some rest. This was not an unusual request, as Anna had been undergoing orthodontic treatment, and her discomfort from the braces was something she often had to manage. However, after some time in her room, Anna returned to the ship's casino to join her paternal grandparents. She appeared to be in good spirits, dressed up, and enjoyed herself as she spent time with them. She was reportedly cheerful, even exchanging a few words of farewell as she prepared to leave the casino and head back to her room. Her mood seemed to be positive, and there was no indication of any distress or unusual behavior from her. Later that evening, both of Anna's younger half-brother, a 14-year-old and stepbrother, 16, returned to their room after spending time in different parts of the ship. However, a concerning sequence of events was reported by Anna's 14-year-old half-brother, who relayed his account through Anna's ex-boyfriend Josh. According to the 14-year-old's version of events, after initially leaving the room to take some photos, he returned to find the door locked. Upon hearing raised voices and an argument inside the room, he reportedly overheard his 16-year-old stepbrother shouting, "Shut the hell up," followed by the sound of furniture or objects being knocked over. The situation seemed tense, and it was unclear what exactly was going on behind the closed door. When the 14-year-old was able to enter the room, the atmosphere had shifted. He went to bed, thinking that Anna had simply gone elsewhere, perhaps to another part of the ship or to spend time with friends. However, when he woke up the next morning, Anna was not in the room, and there was no indication of where she had gone. This mysterious absence, coupled with the unsettling sounds that had been heard earlier, left the family members confused and concerned. It wasn't until much later that her disappearance became a more urgent matter. The events of that night raised several questions about what transpired behind the closed door of the shared room. While Anna had been in good spirits earlier, her sudden absence after what seemed to be a tense argument suggested that something more sinister might have occurred. The loud noises, the shouting, and the locked door were all troubling signs that have since been closely examined in the investigation. The account provided by Anna's half-brother remains an essential piece of the puzzle as authorities work to piece together the truth behind Anna's disappearance and tragic death. The morning of November 7, 2025, began like any other day for Anna's younger half-brother and stepbrother. After waking up, the two boys noticed that Anna was missing from their shared room. At first, they didn't think much of it, assuming that she had either gone out or gone to another part of the ship. They proceeded to head down for breakfast with the rest of the family, unaware of the growing concern over Anna's whereabouts. As the morning wore on, Anna's absence began to draw more attention. Her father, Christopher Kepner, soon realized that his daughter was nowhere to be found. He began searching the ship, asking crew members and family members if anyone had seen Anna. As the search continued, the situation took a more alarming turn when a priority emergency announcement was made, directing attention to the cabin where Anna had been staying. The family, now feeling a growing sense of dread, awaited further details. The discovery came shortly after when a housekeeping staff member went into Anna's cabin to conduct a routine check. The staff member, upon entering the room, found Anna's lifeless body hidden under the bed. It was clear that her body had been concealed, suggesting a deliberate attempt to hide her presence from anyone who might have come looking. The discovery was both shocking and heartbreaking, as it confirmed the worst fears of the family. Anna's body showed no signs of assault, which was a crucial finding in the early stages of the investigation. In addition, no illegal banned substances or substances were found in her system, ruling out the possibility of an overdose or drug-related cause of death. The initial examination indicated that the cause of death was likely to be mechanical asphyxiation, possibly due to strangulation or suffocation, although the full autopsy report had yet to be completed at that point. The careful concealment of Anna's body under the bed, coupled with the absence of signs of physical violence such as cuts or bruises, painted a chilling picture of how the events had unfolded. The absence of physical evidence of sexual assault or drug involvement left investigators focusing on other aspects of the case, including potential motives, the relationships within the family, and the dynamics that may have led to Anna's tragic death. The discovery of Anna's body marked a critical turning point in the investigation. What initially appeared to be a case of a missing person had quickly escalated into a murder investigation. The careful handling of her body, and the lack of any clear cause of death, raised more questions than answers. With the search for the truth now in full swing, investigators were left to untangle the complex web of family relationships and conflicts that might have played a role in her death. As part of the ongoing investigation into the tragic death of Anna Kepner, technical data, including surveillance footage and key card records, have provided crucial insights into the events leading up to her death. This evidence has been instrumental in piecing together the timeline and understanding who had access to the room and when. One of the key pieces of evidence was the hallway camera footage, which captured the movements of the individuals near Anna's room. The footage revealed that Anna and her 16-year-old stepbrother were the last people to be in the room before her death. No other individuals were seen entering or leaving the room after they had arrived. This finding strongly suggests that the two were the only ones present in the cabin at the time when Anna's life ended. While this does not definitively confirm who is responsible for her death, it does narrow the scope of potential suspects, focusing attention on the 16-year-old stepbrother. In addition to the camera footage, data from the key card used to access the room further corroborated this timeline. The key card logs indicated that both Anna and her stepbrother had used their key cards to enter the room at various points during the evening. However, as the night progressed, it became evident that the 16-year-old was the last person to enter or exit the room, further highlighting his presence as the primary witness, if not the key individual involved, in the events leading up to Anna's death. The role of the 16-year-old stepbrother in the case became more complicated during his interview with the FBI. In a highly emotional exchange, which was witnessed by his grandmother, the young man broke down in tears and claimed that he didn't remember anything about what had occurred the night of Anna's death. His statement added another layer of mystery to the case, as it left many questions unanswered. Why was he unable to recall what happened? Was his memory truly foggy, or was there something more sinister at play? These unanswered questions had kept investigators on edge, as they tried to discern whether his lack of memory was genuine or a defensive tactic. The emotional nature of the interview added further complexity to the case. As he cried in front of the investigators and his grandmother, it became clear that he was under immense stress. His inability to provide any concrete details about the events raised suspicions, especially since the surveillance footage and keycard data seemed to place him in the room with Anna just before her death. His reaction during the interview, which appeared to be a mixture of fear confusion, and guilt only served to deepen the mystery surrounding his involvement. Furthermore, the family dynamics, including the presence of his grandmother during the interview, played a crucial role in the investigation. The emotional support, or perceived lack thereof, provided by family members may have influenced the 16-year-old's response to the questioning. It was evident that he was struggling with the weight of the situation, and his emotional outbursts were a reflection of the severe distress he was under. However, the inconsistencies between his statement and the physical evidence raised doubts about the credibility of his account. While the 16-year-old's emotional state was understandable given the tragedy, it also complicated the investigation. The FBI and other investigators were left to sift through conflicting pieces of evidence, the keycard data, the surveillance footage, and the statements made by the stepbrother. His claim of having no memory of the events that transpired the night Anna died stood in stark contrast to the technical evidence, which placed him in the room with her. The situation remains complex, as investigators continue to piece together the information from the surveillance footage, keycard data, and interviews with the family members involved. The 16-year-old stepbrother's lack of memory, combined with the technical evidence pointing to his presence, has made him a central figure in the investigation. While the truth about what happened that night is still unclear, the data has provided point for further examination of the events that led to Anna's untimely death. Complex relationship. In the aftermath of Anna Kepner's tragic death, the interview with her paternal grandparents, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, provided significant insight into the family's perspective on the events leading up to the tragedy. The grandparents were interviewed by various media outlets, including ABC and Good Morning America, and their accounts have become an important part of the public narrative surrounding the case. Barbara and Jeffrey were visibly distressed during the interview, grappling with the shock and grief of losing their granddaughter. They both described Anna as a bright and ambitious young woman who was about to graduate high school and had big plans for her future. They highlighted how close they were to Anna, often speaking about how they enjoyed spending time with her and how important it was for the family to be together on the trip. Barbara mentioned that they had sponsored the trip, hoping it would help the blended family bond, but they never anticipated that it would end in such heartbreak. When discussing the events surrounding the night of November 6th, the grandparents expressed confusion and disbelief. Barbara spoke about how Anna seemed perfectly fine when they last saw her, describing how she was happy and upbeat as she joined them in the casino after excusing herself from dinner due to her jaw pain. She was smiling, laughing, and enjoying herself, Barbara recalled. She didn't seem upset at all. We had no reason to think anything was wrong. However, when Anna didn't return to her room, the family began to get concerned. Jeffrey explained that, at first, they thought she had simply gone off to explore the ship or hang out with friends. She was an independent young woman, and we thought she was just having fun, he said. But when they started looking for her, and the situation became more urgent, they realized something was terribly wrong. Both Barbara and Jeffrey were present when the emergency announcement was made, and they followed the situation closely. They described the panic they felt when they learned that Anna's body had been discovered under her bed by the housekeeping staff. We couldn't believe it. It was like a nightmare we couldn't wake up from, Barbara said, her voice trembling. Throughout the interview, the grandparents struggled with the idea that their granddaughter's life had been taken by someone within the family. When asked about the relationship between Anna and her stepbrother, the 16-year-old, the grandparents were careful with their words. They acknowledged the tension between the two, noting that Anna had always felt a bit uncomfortable in her new blended family, especially with her stepbrother. However, they insisted that they had never seen any signs of violence or conflict that would have suggested something like this could happen. We didn't know there were any issues that serious, Jeffrey said. We saw Anna as someone who was close to everyone in the family, and we never imagined it would come to this. They also stated that, while the family dynamics were complicated, they had hoped the trip would be opportunity for everyone to get along and connect. Barbara and Jeffrey spoke briefly about their frustrations with the investigation, expressing their belief that more should have been done to prevent Anna's death. They emphasized that they wanted justice for Anna, noting how the whole family was still in shock, grappling with the fact that their granddaughter's life had been taken so suddenly and violently. Anna deserved so much more. She had her whole life ahead of her. Barbara said, her voice breaking. And now we just want to know the truth. For Anna and for the rest of the family. The interview with the grandparents painted a picture of a family deeply affected by Anna's death, grappling with the complexity of their relationships and the uncertainty surrounding what truly happened in the hours leading up to the discovery of her body. Their pain was palpable, and their plea for answers was a central part of the emotional appeal surrounding the case. During the interview, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner maintained a calm and composed demeanor, speaking in measured tones without displaying visible anger or tears. Their voices were steady, and they appeared focused on sharing their perspective rather than expressing extreme emotions. The grandparents carefully avoided making direct accusations, choosing instead to focus on the facts as they knew them, and their answers reflected a respectful understanding of the ongoing investigation. When asked about their 16-year-old grandson, the stepbrother of Anna, they described him as a good student who generally kept to himself. They spoke about him in a positive light, emphasizing that he had always been relatively quiet and polite. "He's a good kid," Barbara explained. "He had some struggles, some personal demons, but he was trying to work through them to deal with his issues the best way he knew how." Jeffrey added, "He's never been someone to cause trouble. We've always seen him as a quiet, reserved young man." Their words painted a picture of a teenager who, while facing his own challenges, was not someone they had ever viewed as a threat to anyone, including Anna. However, they were careful to state that they couldn't, and wouldn't, make any definitive judgments. "I can't accuse him of anything," Barbara remarked thoughtfully. "Whatever the law says, we will accept. We just want to know what happened to Anna." Their focus, as they explained, was on seeking answers, rather than pointing fingers prematurely. They were adamant that they trusted the legal process to reveal the truth. The grandparents were not in a rush to judge the situation, understanding the complexity of the investigation and the need for proper analysis by law enforcement, forensic experts, and legal authorities. Their belief was that, despite the tragic circumstances, it was crucial to allow the investigators to piece together the facts based on the evidence available, rather than making conclusions based on assumptions. As they continued, their statements remained measured and impartial, always reflecting the hope that the legal system would bring clarity to what had transpired that night. They expressed their desire for justice for Anna, but their emphasis was on the importance of thorough investigation, forensic expertise, and the rule of law to guide the proceedings. The interview with Anna Kepner's grandparents, Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, raised several points of controversy, particularly in their responses regarding the tragic death of their granddaughter. One of the most striking aspects was the noticeable lack of intense emotional expression or anger when discussing Anna's death. While it is clear that the grandparents were devastated by the loss, their demeanor remained calm and composed, without the tears or visible distress one might expect from grandparents who had just lost a beloved grandchild. This lack of emotional intensity led some to question whether they truly grasped the gravity of the situation, especially considering the violent nature of Anna's death. Another point of controversy was the way the grandparents spoke about the 16-year-old stepbrother, who was a key figure in the investigation. Rather than criticizing or condemning him, they chose to defend him, highlighting his positive traits. They referred to him as a good student and emphasized that he was quiet and trying to deal with personal demons. Their language portrayed him in a compassionate, almost humanizing light, and they expressed a great deal of sympathy for his struggles. This protective stance toward a person who had been in such close proximity to Anna during her final hours, and who was now under scrutiny, sparked criticism from some quarters. Many felt that their focus on defending him was misplaced, especially when the investigation had not yet concluded. A particularly contentious moment came when the grandparents explained their son's behavior by saying, "He does not remember," rather than saying, "He didn't do it." This subtle distinction created a sense of uncertainty and left the impression that they were avoiding a firm stance on the possibility of his involvement. The phrase, "does not remember," shifted the focus toward his memory loss, rather than directly addressing the potential for his guilt. This choice of words, though likely unintentional, left room for ambiguity in their narrative, and has been interpreted by some as a reluctance to confront uncomfortable truths. Additionally, the grandparents refrained from criticizing the controversial room arrangement, where Anna was placed in a room with both her 14-year-old half-brother and 16-year-old stepbrother. Despite the tension that had existed between Anna and her stepbrother, they did not address the potential issues with this living situation, which some saw as an oversight. In a case where family dynamics and relationships were key factors, many felt that the lack of discussion around the rooming arrangements seemed dismissive of the potential role such arrangements might have played in Anna's distress. Perhaps most troubling was the overall tone of acceptance in their responses. Throughout the interview, Barbara and Jeffrey seemed to view Anna's death as an unfortunate accident or inevitable tragedy rather than a deliberate act of violence. This calm acceptance, without a call for immediate action or justice, gave the impression that they were resigned to the idea that what happened was something that could not have been prevented. The language they used did not convey the urgency or outrage that might be expected in such a devastating situation, especially given the violent circumstances of Anna's death. For many viewers, this approach raised questions about the family's response to the loss and whether they fully recognized the seriousness of what had transpired. The approach taken by Anna Kepner's grandparents during their interviews can be understood within the context of legal advice, family dynamics, and public relations strategy. It is plausible that the grandparents, particularly Barbara and Jeffrey Kepner, were guided by legal counsel to avoid making any statements that could potentially implicate other family members, especially Anna's father, Christopher. By refraining from directly accusing anyone or making definitive statements about the cause of Anna's death, the grandparents may have been trying to protect themselves and their family from any legal repercussions, particularly the risk of child endangerment charges against Christopher. This approach reflects a cautious strategy, ensuring that their words would not inadvertently create legal liabilities or complicate the ongoing investigation. Another aspect of their behavior could be tied to their desire to protect the image of the blended family. The Kepner family's complex dynamics, involving both biological and step-siblings, could be a sensitive topic, and the grandparents might have been trying to avoid furbishing their family's reputation. Acknowledging or criticizing certain family relationships, particularly the one between Anna and her stepbrother, could have contributed to negative public perception, so they chose to present a united front. This reflects a common strategy for managing public relations in high-profile cases, where protecting the family's image becomes a priority. The grandparents' emphasis on the stepbrother's mental health struggles may also indicate that they were preparing for a potential defense in the future, should the investigation lead to charges against him. By framing his actions within the context of his personal challenges and mental health, they may have been laying the groundwork for an insanity defense or diminished capacity argument. Mental health issues can be a significant factor in criminal cases, and it is not uncommon for defense teams to highlight them when trying to mitigate responsibility or explain certain behaviors. Additionally, the grandparents' seemingly calm and reserved demeanor may be a manifestation of shock and grief in an unusual form. It is not uncommon for people to react to traumatic events in ways that appear detached or unemotional to outside observers. This could explain their measured responses during the interview, which, while seemingly lacking the expected emotional reaction, could represent a form of psychological defense against the overwhelming grief and shock of losing a grandchild in such tragic circumstances. Finally, it is possible that the grandparents received financial compensation from the media for their interviews, which could have influenced their approach to the situation. Financial incentives for high-profile interviews are not uncommon, and such compensation could have played a role in the grandparents' willingness to participate in the media spotlight. This, however, does not necessarily suggest malicious intent, but rather could be a reflection of the complex intersection between personal grief, family dynamics, and the public's interest in the case. In any case, the investigation continues to rely heavily on the analysis of forensic experts, legal authorities, and the evolving understanding of the family's internal dynamics, which will help clarify the situation further. In high-profile criminal cases, particularly those involving family members as potential suspects or witnesses, the reactions of the family often play a significant role in the public perception of the case. Typically, families of victims may experience a range of emotional responses, including shock, anger, grief, and confusion. However, these reactions can differ significantly depending on the circumstances, relationships, and the individuals involved. In Anna Kepner's case, the grandparents' responses, calm, composed, and measured, contrast with the more typical emotional reactions seen in similar situations. In many cases, when a family member is tragically lost, especially in a violent or suspicious death, the surviving relatives often express intense grief, sometimes accompanied by anger or frustration. Families commonly speak about their loved one's loss in emotional terms, using their public statements to convey the depth of their pain. In the case of victims such as John Bennett Ramsey or Lotsie Peterson, for example, the families were often seen publicly mourning their loved ones, visibly emotional and expressing outrage or confusion about the circumstances of the death. Such expressions are typically fueled by the raw, immediate emotional impact of the loss. In contrast, Anna's grandparents, while undoubtedly affected by the tragedy, maintained a notably composed demeanor throughout their interviews. Their responses were deliberate and neutral, which, in some ways, deviates from the highly emotional reactions that might be expected in cases of violent deaths. Their calmness could be interpreted as an attempt to avoid drawing attention or making public statements that could influence the ongoing investigation. In some families, particularly in cases involving complex family dynamics, such reserved behavior may stem from a strategic decision to avoid emotional outbursts that could potentially damage the family's public or complicate legal proceedings. The grandparents' focus on protecting the stepbrother's reputation and their decision not to criticize the family's living arrangements also stands in contrast to the more common reactions in similar cases. Often, in cases where family members or step-siblings are involved in the death or disappearance of a loved one, the surviving relatives may be quick to express disapproval or call for accountability. However, Anna's grandparents refrained from pointing fingers, even when discussing the tension between Anna and her stepbrother. In typical cases, when there is a perceived conflict or danger within the family, the surviving relatives often express concern about the dynamics that may have contributed to the tragedy. Furthermore, the grandparents' use of terms like "does not remember," instead of directly denying involvement or claiming innocence, is also an outlier when compared to other families' reactions in similar cases. Typically, when family members are interviewed about a possible suspect, they may either stand by the individual in question or firmly deny their involvement. In contrast, the grandparents' language, focusing on memory loss rather than a clear defense of the stepbrother, seems more ambiguous, which may suggest an effort to avoid making definitive statements that could later be contradicted by evidence or legal findings. In summary, the grandparents' reaction to Anna's death reflects a more measured and reserved approach, possibly influenced by legal advice, public relations considerations, and their own emotional responses to the tragedy. While this is not typical for many families dealing with the loss of a loved one in similar circumstances, it provides insight into how family dynamics, legal counsel, and personal coping mechanisms can shape public responses in high-profile cases. Their approach stands in contrast to more overtly emotional reactions often seen in such cases, which are typically marked by anger, grief, and a desire for justice. Responsibilities of adults. The decision to place an 18-year-old girl, Anna Kepner, in a shared room with two younger boys, one of whom was her 14-year-old half-brother, and the other a 16-year-old stepbrother, with whom she had a relatively new and complicated relationship, raises serious ethical concerns. This arrangement, while perhaps intended to accommodate the logistics of a blended family on a cruise, inadvertently created a risky environment for Anna. In cases involving young adults and minors with varying levels of familiarity and emotional connection, the potential for conflict, misunderstanding, or even harmful behavior should be carefully considered. The ethical implications of placing an 18-year-old girl in close proximity to two boys, especially one who was not biologically related to her, are significant. This situation, in hindsight, highlights a lack of attention to the emotional and psychological boundaries that should have been respected in such a family dynamic. Furthermore, it is important to address the previous warnings regarding the behavior of Anna's 16-year-old stepbrother. Reports from Anna's ex-boyfriend, Josh, revealed that the stepbrother had previously exhibited troubling behavior, including inappropriate actions and verbal threats. These incidents, which were allegedly reported to the family, were not given the attention they warranted. Ignoring or downplaying such warnings creates an ethically problematic situation, especially when a vulnerable individual, such as Anna, is involved. The failure to address these concerns in a timely and appropriate manner may have contributed to the tragic outcome. From an ethical standpoint, it is crucial to prioritize the safety and well-being of individuals, particularly young adults, in any family or social setting. The decision to place Anna in a room with her stepbrother, who had demonstrated concerning behavior, can be seen as a failure to protect her from potential harm. In situations like this, it is essential that family members, and particulars, take proactive steps to ensure that warnings about potentially harmful behavior are taken seriously. Failing to do so can place vulnerable individuals at unnecessary risk. Additionally, ethical principles of responsibility and accountability come into play when considering how family members respond to the concerns raised. If allegations of inappropriate behavior were made and not acted upon, it raises questions about the duty of care that should be extended to all members of the family, particularly those who may be in a vulnerable position. A failure to address these concerns in a meaningful way could be seen as neglecting one's ethical obligation to protect family members from harm. In summary, the ethical concerns surrounding Anna's living arrangements and the failure to act on previous warnings about her stepbrother's behavior point to significant lapses in judgment and responsibility. In any family dynamic, it is essential to ensure that the well-being of each individual, particularly those who may be at risk, is given the utmost priority. This case underscores the importance of listening to and addressing concerns promptly, maintaining appropriate boundaries, and taking steps to prevent harm before it occurs. The case surrounding Anna Kepner's death raises important legal questions, particularly regarding potential charges of child endangerment and negligence. If it can be proven that Anna's father, Christopher Kepner, and his wife, Chantel Hudson, were aware of the risks posed by the family dynamics, such as the stepbrother's past behavior, they may face legal consequences under child endangerment laws. These laws are designed to protect children from situations where their safety is compromised due to a lack of proper care, supervision, or foresight by responsible adults. If there is evidence to suggest that Christopher and Chantel were aware of the stepbrother's troubling actions, yet failed to take adequate steps to mitigate the risk, this could be considered negligent behavior under the law. In many jurisdictions, proving child endangerment or negligence requires demonstrating that the responsible party knowingly exposed the child to harm or failed to take reasonable steps to protect them. In this case, if it can be established that Christopher and Chantel knew of the previous incidents involving the stepbrother, such as the reported inappropriate behavior, and still allowed the rooming arrangements and family dynamics to continue as they were, they could face serious consequences. The legal burden of proof in child endangerment cases often revolves around showing that the adults involved were either ignored or were willfully blind to the potential dangers that existed. The ramifications of this case could extend beyond criminal prosecution. If Christopher and Chantel were found to have been negligent, it could have far-reaching consequences on their custody rights over their other children. Family courts take allegations of child endangerment seriously, particularly when it involves actions or inactions that could have jeopardized a child's safety. If it is proven that Anna's death was preventable and that her father and stepmother had a role in exposing her to danger, it could influence future custody decisions, including the potential loss of custody or visitation rights for their other children. In family court proceedings, the primary concerns is always the welfare of the child, and a finding of negligence could impact their ability to maintain custody of their other children. While it may be difficult to pursue criminal charges against parents in cases where negligence is not overt or intentional, family courts can take a more thorough approach in evaluating the overall suitability of a parent or guardian to care for their children. The legal consequences of such negligence may not always lead to criminal prosecution, but the resulting impact on custody rights and visitation privileges could be significant. Furthermore, the broader implications of this case may influence future family law cases. particularly those involving blended families, where the complexity of relationships and the protection of vulnerable individuals is of utmost concern. In conclusion, the legal implications of Anna's death extend beyond the immediate case and may influence broader discussions around child endangerment, family responsibility, and the protection of minors in complex family dynamics. While criminal prosecution may be challenging, the potential loss of custody rights and the impact on future custody disputes are significant legal consequences that Christopher and Chantal could face as the investigation unfolds. Inclusion. As of December 13, 2025, the investigation into the tragic death of Anna Kepner remains ongoing, with no arrests made and the FBI maintaining a stance of silence regarding the details of the case. Despite the growing media attention and public interest, authorities have yet to provide any updates on potential suspects or a clear timeline for the resolution of the investigation. This deliberate withholding of information is likely a strategic move to ensure that the investigation remains untainted by outside influence, and that all aspects of the case are thoroughly examined before any conclusions are made. Given the current lack of arrests, several potential avenues for prosecution remain open, with the investigation still exploring various directions. Among the most significant lines of inquiry is the possibility that Anna's 16-year-old stepbrother could face charges of murder or manslaughter. His presence in the room with Anna on the night of her death, as confirmed by keycard data and surveillance footage, places him at the scene as a primary suspect. However, the absence of physical evidence, such as signs of a struggle or sexual assault, complicates the situation, leaving investigators with more questions than answers. One potential defense that could be constructed by the stepbrother's legal team is the argument of mental health or diminished capacity. The stepbrother has previously been described as a quiet individual, and there have been indications that he may have been struggling with personal issues, including mental health challenges. The grandparents had made statements emphasizing his efforts to deal with these issues, and it is possible that his defense could build on these claims. In such cases, where an individual is suspected of committing a violent act, but there is evidence to suggest that they may have been experiencing a mental health crisis, a defense based on insanity or diminished responsibility is often considered. If such a defense were to be pursued, it could potentially lead to a reduced sentence or a commitment to a mental health facility rather than a standard prison sentence. While a defense based on mental health is a possibility, it is not without its challenges. The prosecution would likely present evidence showing that the stepbrother was capable of understanding the consequences of his actions, especially considering his level of education and prior interactions with others. However, should this defense gain traction, it could delay the legal process and result in further legal and psychological evaluations of the stepbrother's mental state. Another potential development in the case is the possibility of charges being brought against Anna's parents, Christopher and Chantal. While criminal charges against parents in cases of child endangerment or negligence can be difficult to prove, the investigation is likening the possibility that the parents' actions, or lack thereof, contributed to Anna's tragic death. For instance, the decision to place Anna in a shared room with her stepbrother, despite prior incidents of inappropriate behavior, could be seen as a failure to protect her from harm. Additionally, the parents' failure to address concerns raised by Anna's ex-boyfriend about the stepbrother's behavior might be viewed as negligent. If the investigation uncovers evidence that Christopher and Chantal were aware of the risks posed by the stepbrother and still allowed the situation to continue, they could face charges related to child endangerment or negligence. However, pursuing charges against parents is often a long and complex process, requiring clear and irrefutable evidence of their culpability in the child's death. In many child endangerment cases, prosecutors must prove that the parents had direct knowledge of the danger and failed to take appropriate action. In this case, the question of whether Christopher and Chantal knew of the stepbrother's previous troubling behavior and whether they acted to mitigate those risks will be crucial. If there is sufficient evidence to suggest that they knowingly placed Anna in harm's way, the potential for criminal charges against them will remain a possibility. However, given the complexity of such cases and the difficulty in proving parental negligence, it is likely that this aspect of the investigation will take longer to resolve. One of the main reasons for the delays in the investigation is the need to build a strong and airtight case. Law enforcement and forensic experts are working to ensure that all potential scenarios are thoroughly explored and ruled out before making any arrests. This includes gathering additional witness statements, analyzing forensic evidence, and conducting further psychological evaluations of the individuals involved. The FBI's careful approach is necessary to ensure that no stone is left unturned, and that any potential defense or exculpatory evidence is considered before charges are brought. Additionally, the investigation must exclude all possible alternative explanations for Anna's death, including accidental death or a potential third-party involvement. Given the complexity of the family dynamics, it is important to ensure that the right person is held accountable for the crime. Rushing to judgment could jeopardize the integrity of the case and lead to miscarriages of justice. The FBI's focus on ensuring a thorough and precise investigation, while understandable, has led to significant delays in the case's resolution. In high-profile cases like this, public pressure can often accelerate the process. But law enforcement is likely prioritizing accuracy and ensuring that the evidence leads to a just outcome, regardless of external factors. This commitment to a detailed and methodical investigation reflects the serious nature of the case and the determination to uncover the truth. As the investigation continues, several scenarios could play out. If sufficient evidence is gathered to support charges against the 16-year-old stepbrother, we may see the case progress toward trial, with his defense team focusing on mental health as a mitigating factor. This could lead to a lengthy legal battle, potentially involving psychiatric evaluations and expert testimony. Alternatively, if investigators conclude that Anna's parents were negligent in their duty to protect her, we could see charges related to child endangerment brought against Christopher and Chantel. This would complicate the legal proceedings and could extend the timeline of the case even further. Regardless of the eventual outcome, it is clear that the case will continue to be a point of legal and public interest as it unfolds. The tragic death of Anna Kepner, an 18-year-old girl who was found deceased under suspicious circumstances aboard a Carnival cruise ship, highlights several crucial issues related to child safety in blended families, the responsibility of adults to protect minors, and the importance of proper supervision. This case serves as a stark reminder that family dynamics, particularly in blended families, can create environments that unintentionally expose children to significant risks, especially when proper boundaries and safety protocols are not observed. In blended families, where individuals from different parental backgrounds come together, there is often an increased complexity in family dynamics. While the intention may be to create a united, harmonious family unit, the process of blending families requires careful consideration of the emotional and psychological needs of each family member, particularly children. In Anna's case, the decision to place her in a room with her 14-year-old half-brother and 16-year-old stepbrother, one of whom she had a tense relationship with, raises serious questions about the responsibility of parents to ensure safe and appropriate living arrangements. Children in blended families may already be dealing with feelings of displacement, jealousy, or tension, and these emotions need to be carefully monitored by adults to avoid exacerbating conflicts. By failing to consider the emotional and physical safety of Anna, the adults in her life inadvertently created an environment where she was vulnerable. It is essential for parents and guardians to recognize that the blending of families requires time, patience, and an emphasis on safety. Adequate supervision and boundaries must be set to protect children from harm, both physically and emotionally. This includes making thoughtful decisions about shared spaces and ensuring that children are not placed in compromising or uncomfortable situations. In Anna's case, her tragic end could have been prevented if the adults had prioritized her well-being and not assumed that the new family dynamic would automatically foster harmony. One of the most significant issues raised by Anna's death is the question of appropriate supervision for minors. The decision to allow Anna to share a room with her 14-year-old half-brother and 16-year-old stepbrother, one of whom had previously exhibited troubling behavior, was a lapse in judgment regarding the safety and supervision of a young adult. It is a well-established principle that when minors, particularly young women, are placed in shared accommodations, careful consideration must be given to the possible risks posed by these arrangements. In Anna's case, placing her in a confined space with her stepbrother, who had shown signs of inappropriate behavior, was a serious oversight. The failure to intervene or reconsider these rooming arrangements underscores the importance of appropriate adult oversight in the lives of minors. Supervision is particularly critical during family vacations, where children may feel a greater sense of freedom away from their usual routines. The absence of strict supervision in this context can leave young individuals vulnerable to situations they might not otherwise encounter in more familiar environments. In this case, Anna's family failed to recognize the heightened risks of such an arrangement and did not properly supervise the interactions between and her stepbrother, especially after previous concerning behaviors were reported. The case also raises the issue of the responsibility of adults in blended families to report concerning behaviors, particularly instances of harassment or inappropriate actions. Anna's ex-boyfriend, Josh, reported to the family that Anna's stepbrother had exhibited inappropriate behavior toward her in the past, including incidents of unwanted physical proximity and threats. These warnings should have been taken seriously by Anna's father, Christopher, and his wife, Chantel, and should have prompted immediate action to protect Anna. The failure to address these behaviors and to remove Anna from a potentially dangerous situation was a grave oversight. By not reporting these incidents to authorities or taking preventive measures, the adults in Anna's life allowed her to remain in a vulnerable and unsafe environment. Adults have a legal and moral obligation to protect children from harm, and when they fail to act on clear signs of danger, they are contributing to the risk of further harm. In this case, had the warning signs been properly addressed, Anna's tragic death might have been prevented. The lack of intervention is particularly concerning given the prior history of inappropriate behavior and the strained relationship between Anna and her stepbrother. Anna had already expressed discomfort with her stepbrother, yet the adults involved failed to take steps to ensure her safety. This not only reflects poor judgment, but also raises serious ethical and legal questions about the responsibility of parents and guardians in ensuring the well-being of their children. Another issue that this case brings to light is the role of the family in public statements during an ongoing investigation. In high-profile cases, such as Anna's, family members sometimes feel compelled to make public statements, whether to express their grief or to clarify their perspective. However, in cases where criminal investigations are still unfolding, it is generally advised that families refrain from speaking publicly about the details of the case until the investigation has concluded. By making public statements about the case before all the facts have been established, families risk inadvertently influencing the investigation or misdirecting public opinion. In Anna's case, the grandparents' calm and measured responses to the situation may have been influenced by legal advice, but it also drew criticism for a lack of visible emotional reaction. While their grief may have been private, their public statements were interpreted by some as detached, which only added to the controversy surrounding the case. Families involved in criminal investigations should be cautious when addressing the media, as premature or emotional statements could affect the outcome of the investigation. The death of Anna Kepner is, in many ways, a preventable tragedy. Had the adults in her life prioritized her safety over the desire to maintain a facade of family harmony, the outcome could have been drastically different. The decision to place Anna in a shared room with her stepbrother, who had a known history of inappropriate behavior, was a significant error in judgment. Additionally, the failure to address warnings about the stepbrother's behavior, coupled with the lack of appropriate supervision, created a dangerous environment that ultimately led to Anna's death. This case underscores the importance of safeguarding children, especially in blended families where the dynamics can be complicated and fraught with emotional challenges. Parents and guardians must prioritize the physical and emotional well-being of their children above all else. The responsibility to protect children extends beyond the home and into all aspects of their lives, including family vacations and public settings. By recognizing the risks, addressing concerns promptly, and placing the safety of minors above all else, tragedies like Anna's could be prevented. It is a reminder that family harmony should never come at the expense of the safety and well-being of children, and that adult intervention and vigilance are paramount in ensuring that children are protected from harm.